When black people complain about a justice system, we're told by the white society that it's not a perfect system, but it's the best we have. Therefore, when it disproportionately finds us guilty, we should accept and respect the court's decision. But when it finds just one of us not guilty, in the case of O.J. Simpson, they complained unrelentingly that the legal system is broken. The hypocrisy is astounding. The same degree of hypocrisy is also witnessed when they tell us to never forget the Alamo massacre, to never forget the 9/11 tragedy, and most notably, to never forget the Jewish Holocaust. Yet, although the African Holocaust was much worse than any of those, of the three of those combined, it resulted in millions of more deaths and has lasted for 500 years. The white establishment nonetheless tells black people to just forget it and get over it. Many of us have described this profound hypocrisy as being a racist, narcissistic insanity that exists amongst the oppressors. But it's actually an insidious gaslighting warfare tactic. Black people are being perpetually gaslit to manipulate us to believe that there's no validity in any of our grievances towards the white society. Nowadays, whenever black people protest any inequalities by the white establishment, rather than addressing those grievances, this gaslighting tactic allows the white society to divert and distract from the grievances. Doing so literally causes many black people to doubt the legitimacy of our grievances against the white society. The collective minds of large targeted populations are easily manipulated when people don't know the tactic that's being deployed against their minds. Here's why gaslighting of the oppressed is deemed necessary. Whenever people are oppressed for long duration, while their grievances goes unheard by their oppressors, their collective aggressions toward their oppressors will continue to escalate until the oppressed rebels. By gaslighting the oppressed, this confuses them and shifts their collective aggressions away from their oppressors, thus preventing them from rebelling against their oppressors. Those among us who insist that it's now ourselves that are now our own worst enemies, does so because they are ignorant of our true reality that actually confronts us. Our ignorances of the nefarious tactics that white oppressive forces currently deploys against us in order to facilitate their ongoing long-term oppression of us is their greatest weapon against us. This is why those of us who knows the truth must teach African proverb. Now returning to the subject. Nowadays, we all familiar with the term victim peddling and playing the race card, but they're not random statements. They were actually deliberately created by white government agents and white propagandists to deflect from any legitimate claims against white racism. It's how the white establishment now delegitimizes legitimate claims against white racism. They're using gaslight against us. Black people are the unknowing victims of the most elaborate gaslighting psychological warfare campaign in history. The term gaslighting is usually associated with individual abusive relationships, wherein which one person is mentally abused for the benefit of the narcissistic other person. However, the white establishment uses the same gaslighting tactic to mentally abuse black people for the benefit of the white society. Black people are within a psychologically abusive relationship with a narcissistic white society that gaslights us unrelentingly. Case, point, and proof. All lives matters has never been the belief held by the white society. Throughout history, the oppressors have demonstrated a total disregard for the lives of other racial groups. Their subjugation, murders, and exploitation of all other groups are unparalleled. The statement that all lives matters is now merely being used only as a counter narrative to deflect against the black population's declaration that Black Lives Matters. It's intentionally designed to diffuse the moral statement of Black Lives Matters while diverting attention away from the issue of white cops routinely killing innocent, unarmed black people. Within this gaslighting system, The grievances of the black oppressed is never acknowledged nor legitimized by the white establishment. The oppressors instead always presents counter narratives that deflects attention away from the protests. This gaslighting tactic is also what's being done to us when the white establishment labels black people as being racist towards white people for merely speaking out against white racism. This tactic shifts the focus away from the white racism that we're protesting and forces the black population to instead engage in defending ourselves against the false accusation of white racism. Meanwhile, the true issue of white racism against black people is never addressed. I know it sounds like a mind screw, but bear with me. Through this practice, information is always twisted, spun, and or selectively omitted to always favor the oppressors. This practice is continued until the black oppressed begins to doubt the merits of our own protests and eventually stop protesting, having gained no grounds on the issue. Here's another example of how the white establishment gaslights black people. For a very long time, the white establishment have claimed that they don't object to black protests, just as long as it remains peaceful. However, when Colin Kaepernick kneeled in peaceful protest against, again, the routine killing of innocent, unarmed black people by white police officers, the white establishment responded to him rudely. They labeled him as being evil, unappreciative, and unpatriotic. They denigrated his image. That response was actually a gaslighting distraction tactic that oppressors used to deflect the protests from the oppressed. This is how the white establishment subdued the kneeling protests by black athletes without ever addressing the issue. They just kept deflecting from it, until other athletes also became mentally fatigued and stopped protesting the issue. Although the white state has never corrected it. Nothing changed. Within this gaslighting system, the white establishment, as I said, is never acknowledged as morally wrong, and the black oppressed is never acknowledged as morally correct. The white society instead continue creating false narratives that deflects from the black protests. Doing so manipulates many of us to believe that given that our grievances are not being recognized nor acknowledged by the white society, that perhaps it therefore lacks merit. This system literally allows the white oppressors to treat any issue presented by the black population like a can being repeatedly kicked down the street, never being picked up and addressed. The reality is the white ruling elite secretly perceive true equality for black people as being the erosion of their white dominance. This gaslighting system prevents the erosion of white dominance by deflecting and distracting from all black protests rather than addressing them. This practice is continued until black protesters begin to doubt our own positions. Many literally begin to think that the fact that it's not being recognized, that perhaps it lacks merit. Meanwhile, this then causes us to become frustrated, and it shifts our collective aggressions away from the white society, redirect towards ourselves, and we start arguing among ourselves. The minds of large targeted populations are quite easy to manipulate if they're unaware of what's being done to them. Once minds have been confused, manipulation becomes simple. The mind will even ignore common sense, and rationality falls away, even overlooking hypocrisy and deception. This is the hidden reality. Those who insist that it's we that are now our own worst enemies are in fact ignorant of their own ignorance. They are ignorant of our reality. Although we don't face the type of racism as our ancestors did, we still face white racism. They now deploy racism more sophisticatedly because white racism prevails best when the black victim no longer recognizes it. We must elevate our minds above biblical fairy tales, silly slave syndrome, and start learning the social science tactics that are being deployed against us. Then develop counter strategies to overcome them. Brothers and sisters, it is time to wake up to our reality. One love and peace.